The billionaire froze. There, in his office, his maid, Caitlin, was dancing barefoot with her 3 deaf children, their little hands moving in a sign language he had never bothered to learn. Music echoed from a speaker bathed in purple light. His triplets' laughter was silent, but their joy was not. In that moment, the man understood that this new maid was special. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Where is everybody? Jonathan Blackwell's voice echoed through the empty hallway of his mansion. The sound of rain hitting the windows was his only answer. Jonathan loosened his tie as he stepped into his Connecticut home. The large house felt cold despite the heating system running at 72 degrees. He had left work early after closing a $2 billion deal with the Department of Defense. For once, he could return home before the sun set. "Hello?" he called again, his expensive shoes clicking against the marble floor. The 15,000-square-foot estate remained silent. Jonathan walked past a series of framed photographs lining the hallway. Each one showed the same woman, Rebecca, her smile frozen in time. His fingers brushed against a wedding photo before quickly pulling away. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen displayed his assistant's name. "Yes, Diane?" He answered. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Blackwell," Diane said. "I wanted to confirm tomorrow's meeting with the investors at 9 in the morning." "Yes, I'll be there," Jonathan replied, distracted by another photograph. Rebecca pregnant, her hand resting on her large belly, unaware she would never meet the 3 tiny lives growing inside her. "And the product development team needs your approval on—" "Email me the documents. I'll review them tonight," Jonathan said, ending the call. He continued through the quiet house, stopping outside a door with a folder taped to it. The label read, "Nanny Information." Inside were instructions about the daily schedule for Emma, Olivia, and Sophie, his 4-year-old triplet daughters he barely knew. 2 weeks ago, he had hired Caitlin Johnson, the 9th nanny in 4 years. None had stayed longer than 6 months. Managing deaf triplets proved too challenging, especially with an absent father who buried himself in work rather than learn to communicate with his own children. Jonathan was about to head upstairs when he heard something unexpected, music coming from his home office. He frowned. No one used that room except him. He moved quietly down the hallway, the music growing louder. It was something modern and upbeat, not his usual classical preferences. Jonathan slowly turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. His large wooden desk had been pushed against the wall. The expensive leather chairs were arranged in a circle at the edge of the room. In the cleared space, Caitlin Johnson danced barefoot with his 3 daughters. Jonathan froze. All 4 of them moved to the music, but what stunned him wasn't the dancing. It was the animated conversation happening between them. Caitlin's hands moved in complex patterns. She would sign something, and the girls would respond with their small hands, their expressions changing from concentration to delight. Emma, wearing a blue dress, signed something quickly. Her hands moved with confidence Jonathan had never seen before. Caitlin laughed and signed back, her fingers dancing through the air. Olivia, in purple, tugged Caitlin's sleeve and made a series of signs. Sophie, the quietest triplet, watched carefully before adding her own precise movements. None of them had noticed him yet. Jonathan stood transfixed, watching his daughters express thoughts, jokes, and questions in a language he couldn't understand. Their faces showed emotions he had never witnessed. Curiosity, humor, excitement. They were completely different children than the quiet, withdrawn girls he occasionally saw at dinner. Caitlin spun around and spotted him. Her hands froze mid-sign. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, quickly moving to turn down the music. "I didn't expect you home until 8. The girls finally noticed their father. Their animation instantly disappeared. They moved closer to Caitlin, like birds seeking shelter. "We were just having a little dance break," Caitlin explained, her cheeks flushing slightly. The girls finished their lessons early. Jonathan nodded, unable to find words. He had hired Caitlin because her resume listed degrees in early childhood education and proficiency in American Sign Language. But seeing her actually communicating with his daughters, really connecting with them, made him realize how complete their isolation from him had been. "Hello, girls," he said awkwardly. The triplets looked at him without responding. Their identical green eyes, Rebecca's eyes, stared back at him. Caitlin's hands moved, translating his greeting into sign language. Emma signed something back. "Emma says hello," Caitlin translated. "She wants to know if you'd like to join our dance party." Jonathan shifted uncomfortably. "I have some work to finish." Caitlin's hands moved again and the girls' faces fell slightly. "Perhaps dinner at 6, Jonathan added, trying to recover. After Caitlin translated, Olivia nodded while Sophie hid partially behind her sister. "We'll set the table," Caitlin said. "Come on, girls." They filed past him, the triplets staying close to Caitlin. As they headed toward the kitchen, Jonathan noticed their small hands moving, talking about him, he realized, in a language he couldn't understand. He walked into his office and sat heavily in his chair, which Caitlin had returned to its proper place. On his desk sat a drawing. 3 stick figures with a taller female figure. No father in the picture. Jonathan opened his laptop but couldn't focus on the investor reports. Instead, he found himself looking at the family portrait taken 4 years ago. Rebecca sat in a hospital bed, her face tired but happy after delivering 3 healthy babies despite their early arrival. Jonathan stood beside her, looking uncomfortable, holding one of the newborns. He couldn't even remember which daughter he was holding in the photo. After Rebecca died from complications hours after the birth, Jonathan had retreated into his work, leaving his daughters in the care of nannies and housekeepers. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly housekeeper who had worked for them since before the triplets were born, managed the household while a series of nannies came and went. At 6 o'clock, Jonathan went downstairs for dinner. The girls sat at the large dining table, already eating their chicken and vegetables. Caitlin stood nearby, helping Sophie cut her food. "Would you like me to serve you, Mr. Blackwell?" Caitlin asked. "No, thank you. I can manage." Jonathan filled his plate and sat at the head of the table. Emma glanced at him briefly before returning to her meal. "The girls had a productive day," Caitlin reported. "They practiced counting to 20 and learned 5 new animal signs." Jonathan nodded, not knowing how to respond. He watched as Olivia signed something to Caitlin. "Olivia wants to know if you liked her drawing," Caitlin translated. "What drawing?" Jonathan asked. "The one she left on your desk this afternoon." Jonathan felt a pang of guilt remembering the stick figures. "Yes, it was very nice. Thank you, Olivia." When Caitlin signed his response, Olivia smiled shyly. Dinner continued in awkward silence. Jonathan noticed how the girls communicated constantly with Caitlin through small signs, asking for more water, commenting on their food, sharing secret jokes. An entire conversation happened right in front of him, one he couldn't understand or participate in. After dinner, Caitlin took the girls upstairs for their bath and bedtime routine. Jonathan returned to his office, but instead of working, he opened his internet browser. He typed, "How to learn American Sign Language." Thousands of results appeared on his screen. Videos, courses, books, an entire world of communication he had never explored. Jonathan clicked on a video titled ASL Basics for Beginners. A woman appeared demonstrating how to sign simple greetings. Jonathan watched her hands move, trying to imitate the position of her fingers. His own hands felt clumsy and stiff. Later that night, he stood in the hallway outside the triplets' bedroom. The door was partially open. Inside, Caitlin sat in a chair between their beds, her hands moving gracefully as she signed what appeared to be a bedtime story. The girls watched her with complete attention, occasionally signing questions or comments. When Caitlin finished, she kissed each girl goodnight and turned off the main light, leaving a small lamp glowing. "Sweet dreams," she signed and spoke simultaneously. Jonathan stepped back into the shadows as Caitlin exited the room. He waited until she had gone downstairs before approaching the bedroom door again. Inside, his daughters lay in their beds, their small hands occasionally signing to each other across the room until their movements slowed and they fell asleep. That night, Jonathan lay awake in his large, empty bedroom. The rain had stopped, leaving an uncomfortable silence. He realized he was a stranger to his own children. They had an entire way of expressing themselves, their thoughts, fears, dreams that he couldn't understand. Tomorrow, Jonathan decided as he stared at his ceiling, things would change. Jonathan's eyes burned from staring at his computer screen for 3 hours straight. The clock on his desk showed 3:15 in the morning, but he couldn't stop watching the American Sign Language tutorial videos. He rewound the same basic greeting video for the 20th time. "Hello, my name is..." the instructor demonstrated slowly. Jonathan tried to copy the hand movements, his fingers stiff and uncooperative. He had never realized how complex hand positioning could be. After another hour of practice, he finally fell asleep at his desk, his hand still shaped in the letter J for Jonathan. The next morning, Jonathan found Caitlin in the kitchen preparing breakfast for the girls. Emma, Olivia, and Sophie sat at the table eating cereal. They glanced up briefly as he entered, then returned their attention to their food. "Good morning," Jonathan said, his voice unnaturally formal. Caitlin smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. You're up early." Jonathan cleared his throat. "Miss Johnson, could I speak with you privately after breakfast?" "Of course," Caitlin replied, looking slightly worried. The girls watched this exchange with curious eyes. Emma signed something to her sisters, and they all giggled quietly. When breakfast finished, the girls went to the playroom with Mrs. Peterson while Caitlin met Jonathan in the hallway. "Is everything all right, Mr. Blackwell?" she asked. Jonathan took a deep breath. "I want you to teach me sign language." Caitlin's eyes widened. "You want to learn ASL?" "Yes. I spent last night watching videos online, but I need proper instruction." Jonathan's voice remained businesslike, but his hands fidgeted with his tie. "Would you be willing to give me lessons? After the girls are in bed, perhaps?" Caitlin's surprise transformed into a genuine smile. "I would be happy to teach you, Mr. Blackwell. We could start tonight at 8, if that works for you." 8 o'clock. My office." Jonathan nodded formally. "Thank you." 2 hours later, Jonathan sat in his office at Blackwell Technologies headquarters in Boston. His calendar usually showed back-to-back meetings until 8 or 9 at night, but today he was making changes. His executive assistant, Diane, entered with a confused expression. "Mr. Blackwell, you asked me to reschedule your evening meetings?" "Yes, all meetings after 4:30 need to be moved. I'll be leaving the office by 5 today." Diane's eyebrows shot up. 5? But you have the product development review at 6 and dinner with the investors at 7:30. Marcus can handle the review. Cancel the dinner or see if Patricia can attend instead. "Are you feeling well?" Diane asked, concern evident in her voice. Jonathan looked up from his computer. "I'm fine, Diane. I just have some important matters to attend to at home." "Home matters? That's new." Diane had worked with Jonathan for 10 years and had never heard him prioritize anything over work. "Is everything okay with the girls?" "The girls are fine. I just need to be home more." Jonathan turned back to his computer, signaling the end of the conversation. Later that day, Jonathan entered the boardroom for his 2 o'clock meeting. The executives fell silent as he took his seat. "Before we begin," Jonathan said, "I want to inform you all that I'll be delegating more responsibilities to Marcus going forward." Marcus Wilson, the chief operating officer, looked startled. "Sir?" "I need to reduce my hours at the office. You'll be handling most of the evening meetings and some of the client interactions." Jonathan opened his folder. "Now, let's discuss the quarterly projections." The executives exchanged concerned glances, but no one dared question him further. At exactly 5 o'clock, Jonathan left his office. It was the first time in years he had departed before the cleaning crew arrived. The sun was still up, which felt strange as he drove home to Connecticut. That evening at 8, Caitlin knocked on Jonathan's office door. She carried several books and colorful flashcards. "I thought we'd start with the basics," she said, laying out the materials on his desk. "The alphabet, greetings, and family signs." Jonathan sat up straight, ready to approach this like any business challenge. "Where do we begin?" Caitlin demonstrated the ASL alphabet, forming each letter with her right hand. "We'll start with your name." Jonathan attempted to copy her movements, but his fingers felt wooden and unnatural. The letter J required his pinky to extend in a way that felt awkward. "This is more difficult than I anticipated," he admitted after several failed attempts. "Learning any new language takes time," Caitlin said gently, "especially one that uses muscles you're not accustomed to using this way." They practiced for an hour, focusing on the alphabet and basic greetings. By the end, Jonathan could fingerspell his name, though slowly and with concentration. "You're making progress," Caitlin encouraged. "Not enough," Jonathan said, frustrated with his clumsiness. "How long before I can have a real conversation with them?" "Basic conversation might take a few months of regular practice," Caitlin explained. "But connection can start much sooner. The girls will appreciate your effort, even if your signing isn't perfect." Jonathan frowned. "I don't do things imperfectly." "This isn't about perfection, Mr. Blackwell. It's about communication, about showing your daughters you want to enter their world." Later that night, Jonathan practiced in front of his bathroom mirror. His hands shook slightly as he repeated the signs for hello and good morning. He practiced the signs for each daughter's name until his fingers cramped. The next morning, Jonathan entered the kitchen while the girls ate breakfast. Mrs. Peterson looked surprised to see him there so early. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwell," she said. "You're joining the girls for breakfast again?" Jonathan nodded, his attention focused on his daughters. He took a deep breath and raised his hands. "Good morning," he signed slowly, his movements hesitant but deliberate. The girls froze, spoons halfway to their mouths. They stared at their father with wide eyes. Emma was the first to recover. She placed her spoon down and signed back slowly, "Good morning." Olivia watched carefully while Sophie lowered her eyes, not responding. Jonathan tried to sign, "How are you?" but his fingers fumbled. Emma tilted her head, not understanding. The moment grew awkward as Jonathan struggled to remember the correct movements. Caitlin entered the kitchen and immediately assessed the situation. Her hands moved smoothly as she signed to the girls. "Your father is learning sign language," she explained. "He practiced all night to say good morning to you." Emma signed something quickly to Caitlin, her small hands animated. "What did she say?" Jonathan asked. "She wants to know why you're learning now," Caitlin translated, her expression careful. Jonathan looked directly at his daughters. "Because I want to talk to you," he said as Caitlin translated his words into sign language. The weekend passed with Jonathan dividing his time between work and practice. By Saturday morning, he felt confident enough to try signing more with the girls. At breakfast, he carefully signed "Good morning" again, this time adding, "I hope you slept well." Emma signed back enthusiastically while Olivia offered a shy smile. Sophie watched from behind her cereal bowl, her expression guarded but curious. Mrs. Peterson observed this interaction from the doorway, a smile creasing her wrinkled face. It was the first time she'd seen actual communication between father and daughters. That evening, after the girls were in bed, Caitlin found Jonathan practicing in his office. "You're making real progress," she said. "It's not enough," Jonathan replied, flexing his sore fingers. "Emma tried to tell me something about her drawing and I couldn't understand her." "Learning ASL isn't just about the hand movements," Caitlin explained, sitting across from him. "It's about rebuilding trust. The girls have lived 4 years without real communication with their father. They think I don't care about them," Jonathan said quietly. "They need to know you're not going to disappear again once this gets hard," Caitlin said. As if on cue, Jonathan's phone lit up with multiple notifications. The screen displayed urgent messages from Marcus and Diane. The subject line read, "Emergency, Vertex Systems making moves against company stock." Jonathan stared at the urgent messages on his phone screen. His thumb hovered over the call button for several seconds before he placed the phone face down on his desk. "Is everything okay?" Caitlin asked. "Just work," Jonathan said. "It can wait until morning." Caitlin's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's different for you." "I need to practice these family signs before our lesson tomorrow," Jonathan said, returning to his flashcards. "The company has survived emergencies before." The next morning, Jonathan practiced finger spelling while driving to his Boston office. At red lights, he formed each letter of the alphabet, repeating the sequence over and over. When he arrived at Blackwell Technologies, Marcus was waiting in his office. "Jonathan, did you see my messages last night?" Marcus asked, his face tense. "Vertex Systems is buying up shares of our stock." "I saw them. Call a meeting with the legal team at 11, Jonathan replied calmly. "But first I need you to gather the research and development team in the conference room." 30 minutes later, Jonathan stood before his confused R&D team. "I want us to explore technology for the deaf community," he announced. "Assistive devices, visual alert systems, communication tools, everything that could help deaf individuals navigate a hearing world." Dr. Chen, the lead developer, looked puzzled. "That's not really our market area, sir." "It is now," Jonathan replied. "I want proposals on my desk by Friday." Back in his office, Jonathan called a specialized technology company. "This is Jonathan Blackwell. I need a complete visual alert system installed in my home by tomorrow evening." He paused, listening. "Yes, I understand the cost. That's not a concern. I need doorbells, phones, and alarm systems all connected to light signals." After the call, Diane entered his office. "Mr. Blackwell, your 10 o'clock canceled, and these came for you." She placed several books on his desk with titles like Understanding Deaf Culture and ASL for Families. "Thank you, Diane," Jonathan said, immediately opening one of the books. "If you don't mind me asking, why the sudden interest in deaf culture?" Jonathan looked up. "I've spent 4 years unable to communicate with my own daughters. That ends now." The next evening, technicians finished installing the new alert system in the mansion. Jonathan watched as they demonstrated how the lights would flash in different patterns for the doorbell, phone calls, or emergency alarms. "The system is designed to be accessible throughout the house," the lead technician explained. "Each light flashes a specific color for different alerts." Jonathan nodded, imagining how this would help his daughters navigate their home more independently. After the technicians left, Jonathan practiced signing in his study. He didn't notice Emma watching from the doorway until he turned to reach for a book. She quickly stepped back, but Jonathan had already seen her. "Hello, Emma," he signed carefully. Emma hesitated, then signed back slowly. "What are you doing?" Jonathan recognized the question from his lessons with Caitlin. "Learning to talk with you," he signed, his movements deliberate. Emma watched him with curious eyes. She signed something too complex for Jonathan to understand. "Sorry," he signed, remembering the motion for apology. "I don't understand yet." Learning slowly. Emma nodded seriously, then walked away. The following evening during dinner, Emma deliberately placed her cup far from her plate. She looked directly at her father and signed, "Water, please." Jonathan recognized the sign for water. He smiled and passed her cup to her. "Thank you," Emma signed, a small smile appearing on her face. Olivia and Sophie watched this exchange with interest. Olivia tried a similar test, signing napkin while looking at her father. Jonathan hesitated, trying to remember if he'd learned that sign. When he couldn't recall it, he looked to Caitlin for help. "She's asking for a napkin," Caitlin explained, showing him the sign. Jonathan passed the napkin to Olivia, then practiced the new sign several times. Olivia giggled at his efforts. Later that week, Jonathan sat with Caitlin for their evening lesson. "The girls are testing you," Caitlin said. "It's actually a good sign. They're seeing if they can trust you to understand them." "I'm failing most of their tests," Jonathan admitted. "I only recognize about a quarter of what they sign." "But you're trying, and they see that," Caitlin encouraged. "Today I want to teach you color signs and question words. They're essential for basic conversation." They practiced for an hour, with Jonathan repeating the signs for different colors and questions like what, where, and why. The next morning, Jonathan spotted Emma drawing with colored markers. He sat beside her and carefully signed, "What is your favorite color?" Emma's eyes widened in surprise. She hesitated before signing back. "Blue." "Oh, blue is pretty," Jonathan signed, using the few words he knew. Emma nodded enthusiastically and began signing rapidly, showing him her drawing and pointing to different blue objects around the room. Jonathan tried to follow but quickly became lost in her fast signing. His face must have shown his confusion because Emma's excitement faded. She put down her marker and walked away, disappointed. That evening, Jonathan called Caitlin into his office. "I need to learn faster," he said. "I had a moment with Emma today about her favorite color, but then I couldn't understand her response. She was so excited and I ruined it." Caitlin considered for a moment. "It might help for you to meet other people from the deaf community. My brother Robert was born deaf. He's visiting me this weekend. Would you like to meet him?" "Your brother is deaf?" Jonathan asked, surprised. "Yes. That's why I learned sign language as a child. Our mom made sure we could communicate as a family. I'd like to meet him," Jonathan decided. That Saturday, Robert Johnson arrived at the Blackwell mansion. He was a young man in his 20s with the same warm smile as his sister. "Robert, this is Mr. Blackwell." Caitlin signed and spoke simultaneously. "Nice to meet you," Jonathan signed carefully. Robert grinned and signed back quickly. "He says your signing is better than he expected," Caitlin translated. The three adults sat in the living room while the girls played nearby. Robert watched the triplets signing to each other. "They have their own language," he signed, with Caitlin translating for Jonathan. "Twins and triplets often develop unique signs between themselves." "What was it like growing up deaf?" Jonathan asked, with Caitlin interpreting. Robert's hands moved expressively as he explained his experiences. He described the frustration of family gatherings where relatives didn't sign, feeling isolated at the dinner table while everyone else laughed at jokes he couldn't hear. "The worst part wasn't being deaf," Robert signed. "It was being invisible to people who didn't make the effort to communicate with me." Jonathan glanced at his daughters. "What did your parents do wrong?" he asked bluntly. Robert smiled. "My dad never learned to sign properly. He knew about 20 signs and fingerspelling. He thought that was enough." Robert paused. "But he came to every school event. He tried to understand my world. His signing was terrible, but his presence mattered." Jonathan took notes on his phone as Robert continued. "My mom learned to sign fluently. She made our home deaf-friendly with visual alerts and made sure Caitlin learned ASL too. But most importantly, she made sure I knew I belonged in the family." As the afternoon continued, Robert interacted with the triplets, who were delighted to meet another deaf adult. They signed rapidly with him, showing off toys and books. When it was time for Robert to leave, he turned to Jonathan. "Your daughters don't need a perfect signer," he signed, Caitlin translating. "They need a father who won't give up." Jonathan nodded, feeling the weight of those words. After Robert left, Jonathan sat in his office reviewing what he'd learned. His phone buzzed with an alert. The screen showed a news article. "Vertex Systems increases stake in Blackwell Technologies. Hostile takeover suspected." Jonathan stared at the headline, thinking about Robert's words and his daughters playing upstairs. For the first time in his career, the company crisis didn't seem like his most pressing concern. His phone rang. Marcus calling again. Before Jonathan could answer, a new alert flashed across the screen. Blackwell's stock had dropped 7% in afternoon trading. The business empire he had spent a decade building was under attack, just as he was finally building a relationship with his daughters. Jonathan answered Marcus's call with a deep breath. "I've seen the news," he said, his voice steady despite the crisis. "We need you in the office immediately," Marcus insisted. "Alexander Hayes is making his move. Our investors are panicking." Jonathan looked at the framed photo on his desk, his late wife Rebecca. He thought about what she would say about this moment. "I'll be there in an hour," Jonathan replied. "Set up an emergency meeting with the board for tomorrow morning." When he hung up, Jonathan found Caitlin in the hallway. "You heard?" he asked. She nodded. "Your company is in trouble. I need to go back to the office tonight. Can you explain to the girls? Tell them I'll still be here for breakfast." "I'll tell them," Caitlin said, "but they'll notice if this becomes a pattern again." The next morning, Jonathan returned home just in time to see his daughters before school. His eyes were tired from a night of emergency meetings, but he made an effort to sign "Good morning" to each girl. Sophie, usually the most reserved, studied his face carefully. She signed something to Caitlin. "What did she say?" Jonathan asked. "She's asking if you're sad," Caitlin translated. Jonathan knelt to Sophie's level. "Not sad," he signed carefully. "Just tired. I had to work late." Sophie nodded seriously, her eyes still watching him. After the girls left with Caitlin for their morning activities, Jonathan changed for his board meeting. As he adjusted his tie, he made a decision. Within an hour, contractors were at his mansion, measuring his home office. "I need a complete video conferencing system installed today," Jonathan told them, "the highest quality available. Cost is not a concern." At Blackwell Technologies, the board meeting was tense. Richard Klein, one of the oldest board members, didn't hide his disapproval. "You left the office at 5 yesterday and Vertex Systems announced their stock purchase at 5:30, Richard said. "This is not a coincidence, Jonathan. Alexander Hayes is counting on your distraction." "I am not distracted," Jonathan countered. "I'm delegating." "There's a difference. Your personal situation is affecting this company," Richard continued. "You've missed 3 important client dinners this month." Patricia Summers, the chief financial officer, spoke up. "The numbers don't support your concern, Richard. Our performance metrics are stable." "For now," Richard warned, "but Alexander Hayes isn't taking family leave. He's working 20-hour days to take what you built." Jonathan remained calm. "I've authorized a new home office setup. I'll be fully connected while maintaining my family commitments." "Your family commitments," Richard repeated slowly. "You mean the ones you didn't have time for until 2 weeks ago?" The room fell silent. Everyone knew about Jonathan's absent parenting, but no one had ever mentioned it directly. "That will be all for today," Jonathan said coldly. Meeting adjourned. When Jonathan returned home that afternoon, technicians were completing the installation in his office. The space now contained multiple screens, advanced audio equipment, and a camera system that could follow him as he moved around the room. "The system is connected to your company network," the lead technician explained. "You can join any meeting from here with one touch." Jonathan tested the system with a call to Diane. Her face appeared on the main screen, crisp and clear. "It's like you're right here in the office," Diane said, impressed. "The board members won't be able to complain about this setup." That evening, Jonathan prepared visual materials to explain his work to the girls. He created colorful cards with simple drawings of computers, office buildings, and people. When the triplets returned from their afternoon activities, he invited them to see his new office. The girls entered cautiously. Emma immediately noticed the new equipment, pointing at the screens with curiosity. Olivia spotted the colorful cards on the desk, while Sophie stayed close to the door. "This is where I work when I'm home," Jonathan signed slowly, using the signs Caitlin had taught him. Emma approached the desk and picked up one of the cards. It showed a simple drawing of a computer with the sign for technology written beneath it. "My company makes technology," Jonathan explained, with Caitlin helping translate the more complex concepts. "We create computers and programs." Emma tilted her head and signed a question. Jonathan looked to Caitlin for help. "She's asking if your company makes things for deaf people," Caitlin translated. Jonathan hesitated. In all his years building Blackwell Technologies, he had never considered developing products specifically for the deaf community. "Not yet," he signed, "but maybe we will soon." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. Olivia started drawing on one of the blank cards, adding her own illustrations to Jonathan's explanation. The next day, Dr. Sarah Livingston arrived at the mansion. She was a specialist in deaf education from New York University, recommended by Robert. "I'd like to observe the girls in their natural environment before making any assessments," Dr. Livingston explained. She spoke and signed simultaneously, her hands moving fluidly. Throughout the day, Dr. Livingston watched the triplets as they played, learned, and interacted with Caitlin. She took detailed notes on each child's communication style. "Emma is very expressive," Dr. Livingston told Jonathan later. "She uses complex sentence structures and has strong leadership qualities." She flipped through her notes. "Olivia communicates more through art than direct signing. She's visually oriented even beyond typical deaf children. And Sophie, she observes everything. Her signing is precise, but she's selective about when she chooses to engage." "Are they developing normally?" Jonathan asked, the question that had worried him for years. "Linguistically, they're actually ahead of many deaf children their age," Dr. Livingston replied. "Caitlin has done an excellent job, but socially they need more interaction with both deaf and hearing peers." She handed Jonathan a brochure for the Hartford School for the Deaf. This specialized school has trained teachers who are deaf themselves. The students learn in sign language while also developing reading and writing skills in English. Jonathan studied the brochure. "You think they should leave home for school?" "The program offers both residential and day options. Given their age and your situation, I'd recommend starting with part-time attendance." When Dr. Livingston left, Jonathan noticed Caitlin's worried expression. He hadn't considered how these recommendations might affect her position. "You've been thinking about schools?" Caitlin asked. "I've been thinking about what's best for them," Jonathan replied. "Dr. Livingston believes they need peer interaction." "They do," Caitlin agreed, "but they also need stability. They've had 8 different nannies before me. They're just starting to trust that I won't disappear." "I'm not planning to let you go, Caitlin," Jonathan assured her. "Whatever educational path we choose, you're part of this household." Later that night, Jonathan joined a video conference with his executive team from his home office. They discussed strategies to counter Vertex Systems' moves. Halfway through the meeting, Jonathan noticed a small figure at the door, Sophie watching him quietly. Jonathan signed 1 minute to her, then quickly explained to his team that he needed a brief pause. "Sophie, what's wrong?" He signed, opening the door. "Can't sleep?" Sophie shook her head and handed him a drawing. It showed their family. 3 small figures, 1 taller figure that must be Caitlin, and 1 figure in a box that Jonathan realized represented him in his office. "Are you working all night?" Sophie signed slowly, using simple signs she knew he would understand. "No," Jonathan signed back. "Just a short meeting. Then sleep." Sophie nodded, seemingly satisfied. As she turned to leave, Jonathan had a revelation. His daughters didn't just need him to learn their language, they needed to be sure he wouldn't retreat into his work world again. As he returned to his meeting, Jonathan's phone buzzed with an alert. Alexander Hayes had called a press conference for tomorrow morning to announce significant news regarding Blackwell Technologies. Jonathan stared at his phone, reading the alert about Alexander Hayes's press conference. His first instinct was to call Marcus immediately, but then he looked at Sophie standing there in her pajamas, clutching her drawing and waiting for him to finish his meeting. "Everything okay, Jonathan?" Patricia asked from the video screen. "I need to end this call," Jonathan said firmly. "Sophie is here and I promised her I wouldn't work all night." The executives exchanged surprised glances. "But the press conference tomorrow," Marcus began. "We'll wait until morning," Jonathan interrupted. "We'll reconvene at 7 tomorrow. Good night." He ended the call and turned to Sophie with a smile. "Now, how about that story?" Sophie's eyes widened with surprise when Jonathan took her hand and led her back to her bedroom. Emma and Olivia were already asleep as Jonathan sat on Sophie's bed with the storybook she had brought him. "I try my best," Jonathan signed, opening the book. For the next 20 minutes, Jonathan struggled through the simple children's story, signing what words he knew and pointing to pictures for ones he didn't. Sophie watched intently, occasionally correcting his hand positions with her tiny fingers. When he finished, Sophie smiled. The first real smile she had given him since he began learning sign language. "Again tomorrow?" She signed. "Yes," Jonathan promised. "Every night." After Sophie fell asleep, Jonathan returned to his office and prepared for the emergency board meeting he knew would come in the morning. Instead of drafting defensive strategies, he created a detailed restructuring plan for Blackwell Technologies. The next morning, Jonathan arrived at the company headquarters early. The executive floor buzzed with tension as he walked through. Alexander Hayes's press conference was scheduled for 9, and board members had called for an emergency meeting at 7:30. Jonathan entered the boardroom to find all 12 members already seated. Richard Klein's face showed open hostility. "You ignored critical alerts last night," Richard began without greeting. "Alexander Hayes is announcing a takeover bid this morning, and you were reading bedtime stories." "To my daughter, yes," Jonathan replied calmly, placing a folder on the table. Victoria Reese, another senior board member, slid a document toward Jonathan. "Our quarterly performance has dropped 7% since you began your family focus. The timing of Hayes's move is not coincidental." Jonathan opened the folder he had brought. "Before we discuss Hayes, I'd like to propose a restructuring of leadership roles." The room fell silent. "I'm not stepping down," Jonathan continued, "but I am recommending changes that will benefit our company long-term." He distributed copies of his proposal to each board member. "I'm nominating Patricia Summers to serve as Chief Operating Officer with expanded powers. She'll handle day-to-day operations while I focus on vision, strategy, and our new assistive technology division." Richard scoffed. "Assistive technology? For deaf people, that's a niche market at best." "It's an untapped billion-dollar industry," Jonathan countered, "and we'll be first to market with advanced solutions." Patricia, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "I've reviewed Jonathan's proposals. The numbers support this direction, both for company stability and growth potential." The debate continued for almost an hour. Finally, the board voted 6-5 in favor of Jonathan's restructuring plan, with one abstention. As they prepared to watch Hayes's press conference, Patricia approached Jonathan. "You surprised everyone today," she said quietly, "including me." "Are you ready for this expanded role?" Jonathan asked. Patricia nodded. "I've been ready for years. But may I ask what prompted this now?" Jonathan showed her the drawing Sophie had given him the night before. "I realized I can't be in two places at once, and right now, they need me more than the company does." Alexander Hayes's press conference was brief and calculated. He announced Vertex Systems had acquired 11% of Blackwell Technologies stock and intended to pursue more. "Blackwell Technologies has lost focus under its current leadership," Hayes stated smoothly. "We believe our management approach would better serve shareholders." Immediately following the announcement, Jonathan and Patricia held their own press conference. Jonathan spoke first, introducing Patricia as the new COO. Then he revealed their plans for innovative assistive technology for the deaf community. Blackwell Technologies is expanding into an underserved market with tremendous growth potential, Jonathan explained. We're not losing focus, we're broadening our vision. The company's stock, which had dropped early in the morning, stabilized by afternoon. When Jonathan returned home that evening, he found Robert Johnson waiting in his office. Caitlin told me about the girl's birthday next month. Robert signed as Caitlin translated. I want to help with your speech. I appreciate that, Jonathan replied. I want to say something meaningful, but my signing is still basic. We can prepare something special that matches your current abilities, Robert suggested. What do you want to tell them? Jonathan thought for a moment. That I'm sorry for missing 4 years of their lives, that I want to be part of their world now. For the next hour, Robert helped Jonathan craft a birthday message that used relatively simple signs but conveyed deep meaning. They recorded the practice session so Jonathan could rehearse. Over the next weeks, Jonathan balanced his new work arrangement with intensive sign language practice. Each night, his hands would cramp from repeating the same signs over and over. Sometimes he practiced until 2 in the morning, determined to perfect his birthday message. At home, the mansion continued its transformation. Jonathan worked with contractors to create a special learning space in what had been a rarely used family room. Interactive screens with sign language programs were installed throughout the room, along with comfortable seating areas for reading and learning. Mrs. Peterson watched these changes with approval. One afternoon, as she helped Caitlin prepare lunch, she commented, I haven't heard children's laughter in this house for years. It's about time. The girls began to show more trust in their father. Emma would test him with new signs, appearing pleased when he recognized them. Olivia started leaving her artwork where Jonathan would find it, drawings that increasingly included him in family scenes. And Sophie, quiet, watchful Sophie, began a nightly ritual of bringing Jonathan a book before bedtime. These moments became sacred to him, protected time that not even company emergencies could interrupt. 2 weeks before the birthday celebration, Dr. Livingston returned to evaluate the girls' progress. She observed the new learning environment with approval. You've made impressive changes, she told Jonathan. The visual learning tools are excellent. Have you considered the school options we discussed? I've been researching alternatives, Jonathan replied, handing her a binder he had prepared. I'd like your opinion on a hybrid approach. Dr. Livingston raised her eyebrows, surprised by his thoroughness. She reviewed his proposal for part-time attendance at the specialized school combined with an enrichment program at home. This is remarkably well thought out, she admitted. The blend of formal education with deaf teachers and home learning with hearing peers could provide excellent balance. Jonathan nodded. I also want to invite hearing children to learn sign language here. The girls shouldn't have to do all the adapting. After Dr. Livingston left, Jonathan found Caitlin looking worried in the kitchen. You've been meeting with schools and planning programs, she said. I understand the girls need formal education, but you're wondering about your place in all this. Jonathan finished her thought. Yes, I care about them deeply, but if they're going to school, I'd like you to coordinate the home education program, Jonathan interrupted. With a significant title and salary increase, of course. The girls trust you and your expertise is invaluable. Relief washed over Caitlin's face. I'd be honored. That evening, as Jonathan helped the girls explore their new learning space, Emma immediately took charge of the interactive screen, showing her sisters how it worked. Olivia discovered drawing applications that responded to her touch. Sophie methodically examined each new item in the room. Jonathan watched them with pride, seeing how they each approached the world in their unique ways. For the first time, he felt he was truly seeing his daughters as individuals. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Caitlin's mother in Chicago. Robert's been in a serious accident. Caitlin needs to come home immediately. Jonathan's heart sank. The girl's 5th birthday was just 3 days away. Robert's been in a serious accident. Caitlin needs to come home immediately. Jonathan read the text message twice before hurrying to find Caitlin. He found her in the kitchen preparing dinner. The moment she saw his face, she knew something was wrong. What happened? she asked. "It's your brother," Jonathan said, holding out his phone. "Your mother just texted me." Caitlin's hands trembled as she read the message. "I need to call her right now." While Caitlin spoke with her mother, Jonathan stood in the doorway, watching the triplets play in their new learning space. The girls had no idea their trusted caregiver would soon be leaving, just days before their birthday celebration. Caitlin ended the call, her eyes filled with tears. "Robert was in a car crash. He's in surgery right now. I need to go to Chicago tonight." "Of course," Jonathan nodded. "I'll have my driver take you to the airport." "The girl's birthday is in 3 days," Caitlin said, her voice breaking. "All the plans we made, I've been working on this for months." "The birthday will be fine," Jonathan assured her, though he felt far from certain. "The girls will understand why you had to leave." "But your speech, we haven't finished practicing," Caitlin worried. "And the schedule, the food, the activities, there's so much to coordinate." "I'll handle it," Jonathan said firmly. "Robert needs you more than we do right now." While Caitlin rushed upstairs to pack, Jonathan entered the learning room. The triplets looked up as he approached. "I need to tell you something," he signed slowly. The girls gathered around him, sensing his seriousness. "Caitlin has to go away for a few days," he signed, using the simple phrases he had mastered. "Her brother Robert is hurt. She needs to help him." Emma immediately signed a flurry of questions that Jonathan couldn't follow. He held up his hands. "Slow, please," he signed. "I'm still learning." Emma tried again, more slowly. "When will she come back?" "I don't know," Jonathan signed truthfully. "Soon, I hope." Sophie's lower lip trembled. Olivia looked down at the floor. "But I will be here," Jonathan added, making sure to sign clearly. "We will still have your birthday party." 30 minutes later, Jonathan helped Caitlin load her suitcase into the car. "I've left detailed notes about the birthday on your desk," she said. "Everything is ordered, but you'll need to confirm the cake delivery tomorrow and finish the goodie bags for the guests." "I'll take care of it," Jonathan promised. Caitlin hugged each of the girls goodbye, explaining in sign language that she would be back as soon as she could. "Be good for your father," she signed. "He's trying very hard." As the car pulled away, Jonathan felt a moment of panic. For weeks, he had relied on Caitlin to bridge the communication gap with his daughters. Now he would have to manage on his own. That night, getting the girls ready for bed proved challenging. Their bedtime routine, usually managed seamlessly by Caitlin, became a series of misunderstandings. Jonathan couldn't understand all their requests, and they grew frustrated with his limited signing. Emma wanted a specific pajama set that Jonathan couldn't find. Olivia refused to brush her teeth until Jonathan guessed correctly that she wanted her special toothpaste with stars on the tube. Sophie simply watched with worried eyes, clutching the book she wanted read to her. By the time all 3 girls were finally in bed, Jonathan was exhausted. Yet instead of sleeping, he spent hours studying Caitlin's birthday preparation notes and practicing his birthday message. Without Robert's guidance, he recorded himself signing and analyzed the video, trying to correct his own mistakes. The next morning, Jonathan called Patricia from his home office. "I need to work from home for the next few days," he explained. "Caitlin had to leave suddenly, and I'm alone with the girls until after their birthday." "Of course," Patricia replied. "The restructuring announcement has stabilized our position for now. I can handle things here." "Thank you," Jonathan said. "I've never done this alone before." "You've run a billion-dollar company through multiple crises," Patricia reminded him. "You can manage 3 little girls for a few days." But as the day progressed, Jonathan realized that managing 3 deaf children was nothing like running a company. The girls had routines and expectations that he struggled to fulfill. They communicated with each other easily but became frustrated when he couldn't understand them. During breakfast, Jonathan burned the toast. At lunchtime, he made sandwiches with the wrong kind of bread. By dinner, he had resorted to ordering food delivery, which the girls accepted with suspicious looks. "This isn't what Caitlin makes," Emma signed slowly so he would understand. "I know," Jonathan signed back. "I'm not as good at cooking." Emma considered this, then signed, "That's okay. You're good at other things." "Like what?" Jonathan asked, curious. Emma thought for a moment, then signed, "You try hard." Her simple observation moved Jonathan deeply. The next day, Jonathan created a visual schedule with pictures showing daily activities. He placed it on the refrigerator where the girls could see it, and they responded positively to the structure. He confirmed the cake delivery and finished assembling goodie bags while the girls napped. With each small accomplishment, his confidence grew. That evening, Jonathan video-called Caitlin at the hospital. "How's Robert?" he asked. "The surgery went well, but he's still unconscious," Caitlin said, looking exhausted. "The doctors are hopeful." "And how are you holding up?" "Worried but okay," she replied. "How are the girls?" "Managing better than I expected," Jonathan admitted. "We've had some miscommunications, but we're figuring it out. I made a visual schedule that seems to help." Caitlin smiled weakly. "That was smart. They respond well to visual cues." "Will you be back for the birthday?" Jonathan asked, though he already knew the answer. Caitlin shook her head. "I can't leave while Robert's condition is still uncertain." "I'm so sorry, Jonathan." "Don't apologize," he said firmly. "Family comes first. That's something I'm finally learning." After ending the call, Jonathan practiced his birthday speech again. His hands moved more confidently now, though certain signs still felt awkward. Without Robert's guidance, he worried his message wouldn't be clear enough. The day before the birthday, the mansion became a flurry of activity. Decorators arrived to set up balloons and banners in the main living room. Caterers prepared food in the kitchen. Mrs. Peterson helped organize the gifts Jonathan had purchased weeks ago on Caitlin's recommendation. "You're doing remarkably well, Mr. Blackwell," Mrs. Peterson said as she helped him wrap the final present. "I've been with this family since before the girls were born, and I've never seen you so involved." "I should have been this involved from the beginning," Jonathan replied. That night, Jonathan faced a new challenge when Emma became upset because he couldn't understand what she was trying to tell him about her birthday outfit. After several failed attempts at communication, Jonathan grabbed a drawing pad and gave Emma a marker. "Draw it," he suggested, signing and speaking simultaneously. Emma drew a simple picture of a girl wearing a crown. Jonathan smiled with understanding. "You want to wear a crown tomorrow," he signed. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Smart solution, Daddy," she signed back, using the sign for Daddy that Jonathan had only recently learned. It was the first time any of his daughters had called him Daddy in sign language, and the moment nearly overwhelmed him. Late that night, after checking all the birthday preparations one final time, Jonathan video-called Dr. Livingston for last-minute coaching on his signing. "I'm worried my message won't be clear enough," he admitted. "Robert was supposed to help me practice, and Caitlin is gone too." "Sign from your heart," Dr. Livingston advised. "Your daughters will understand your meaning, even if your signs aren't perfect." As Jonathan finally prepared for bed, he found Sophie standing in his doorway with her favorite book. "Story?" she signed hopefully. Though exhausted, Jonathan smiled and patted the bed beside him. "Yes, one story." As he signed the familiar tale, Jonathan realized his fingers moved more naturally now. The daily practice was showing results. When Sophie corrected one of his signs, he noticed she did it more patiently than before, waiting for him to get it right instead of growing frustrated. After Sophie returned to her room, Jonathan stood before his bathroom mirror, practicing his birthday message one last time. His hands trembled slightly, but his determination was unwavering. Tomorrow would be the most important speech of his life, not because of the words, but because of who would be watching his hands. Jonathan barely slept that night. By 5:30 in the morning, he was already awake, mentally rehearsing his sign language speech while staring at the ceiling. Today was the day, the triplets' 5th birthday. He checked his phone immediately. No new messages from Caitlin. The last update from yesterday evening indicated Robert was showing signs of improvement, but remained in intensive care. The mansion was quiet as Jonathan moved through the hallways. He stopped in the kitchen to review his handwritten schedule for the day. 8 o'clock, girls wake up. 9 o'clock, breakfast. 10 o'clock, final decorations. 12 o'clock, lunch. 2 o'clock, guests arrive. 3 o'clock, cake and presents. 4 o'clock, special message. Each item had been carefully planned with backup options. Jonathan had learned from the past few days that nothing with children goes exactly as expected. Mrs. Peterson arrived at 7:30, looking surprised to find Jonathan already dressed and preparing breakfast. "You're up early, Mr. Blackwell," she said. "Couldn't sleep," Jonathan replied, mixing pancake batter. "Today has to be perfect." Mrs. Peterson smiled gently. "Children don't need perfect, sir. They just need presents." At exactly 8:15, Emma was the first to emerge from the bedroom, her hair wild from sleep. She looked around the kitchen with confusion. "Where's Caitlin?" She signed. "Still with Robert." Jonathan signed back carefully. "Remember? He's sick." Emma nodded, then looked at the pancake batter with suspicion. "You're cooking?" "Trying," Jonathan signed with a smile. Soon, Olivia and Sophie joined them, both showing the same surprise at finding their father making breakfast. When the first batch of pancakes turned out too dark on one side and undercooked on the other, the girls exchanged glances. "Maybe cereal instead?" Jonathan offered, signing and speaking at once. This suggestion was met with enthusiastic nodding. After breakfast, Jonathan faced the challenge of getting the girls dressed in their special birthday outfits. Caitlin had laid everything out with detailed notes, but the reality proved more difficult than anticipated. "Your hair is difficult," Jonathan signed to Emma as he attempted to create the braided style Caitlin had demonstrated in a video message. Emma's response was to giggle as she watched his frustrated attempts in the mirror. After 3 failed tries, Jonathan produced something that resembled a braid, though not the neat version Caitlin would have created. Olivia was more patient, sitting still as Jonathan carefully tied ribbons in her hair. Sophie, however, refused to let him touch her hair at all, signing no repeatedly until Mrs. Peterson stepped in to help. By mid-morning, the caterers arrived to set up for the party. The living room had been transformed with colorful decorations, and a table displayed framed photographs of the girls from birth until now. Jonathan had added a large portrait of Rebecca, wanting her presence to be felt on this important day. At 11:30, Jonathan's phone rang. It was Patricia. "How's everything going?" she asked. "Controlled chaos," Jonathan admitted. "But we're managing." "The board is asking why you're not calling in for the investor briefing," Patricia said. "Richard Klein specifically mentioned that personal issues shouldn't interfere with shareholder obligations." Jonathan sighed. "Tell Richard that my daughters turn 5 only once. The investors can wait a day." "I already defended your absence," Patricia assured him. "I showed them the quarterly projections. We're actually up 2% since the restructuring." "Thank you, Patricia. I owe you." "No," she replied. "You don't. You're finally doing what Rebecca would have wanted." After the call, Jonathan found Emma trying to reach a box on a high shelf in the learning room. "What do you need?" He signed. Emma signed something too complex for Jonathan to understand. After a few attempts at clarification, they both grew frustrated. "Wait," Jonathan said, retrieving a drawing pad and markers from the desk. "Draw what you want." Emma quickly sketched a crown with jewels. Jonathan immediately understood, the princess crown she had mentioned for her birthday outfit. "Smart idea," Emma signed, looking at the drawing pad with approval. For the next hour, the drawing pad became their communication bridge. When words failed, pictures worked. Jonathan kept it with him as he completed the party preparations. At 1:45, guests began arriving. Teachers from the girls' preschool came first, followed by several families with both deaf and hearing children. Dr. Livingston arrived with administrators from the Hartford School for the Deaf. Several of Jonathan's business associates brought their children as well. Mrs. Peterson greeted everyone at the door while Jonathan stayed with the Triplets, helping them welcome their guests. He signed basic greetings, sometimes needing the drawing pad for clarification, but managing to communicate more effectively than he would have thought possible just days ago. Emma took charge of introducing her sisters to guests, proudly signing their names and ages. Olivia showed visitors her artwork displayed around the room, while Sophie stayed close to Jonathan, occasionally hiding behind his legs when too many people approached. As the party progressed, Jonathan checked his phone repeatedly for updates from Caitlin. Finally, a message appeared. Robert opened his eyes today. Doctors are optimistic. How's the party going? Jonathan quickly snapped a photo of the girls surrounded by friends and sent it with the message, "We miss you, but we're doing well. The girls are happy." At 3 o'clock, it was time for cake. The caterers wheeled in a large cake decorated with colorful frosting flowers and the girls' names. The guests gathered around as Jonathan helped the triplets stand before their cake. Instead of singing, the group followed Dr. Livingston's lead in signing "Happy Birthday" while Jonathan lit the candles. The girls beamed with delight, especially when they noticed that many of their hearing guests were attempting to sign along. After cake came presents. The triplets opened gift after gift, their excitement growing with each colorful package. Jonathan had purchased special gifts based on each girl's interests: art supplies for Olivia, books for Sophie, and a child-sized leaderboard for Emma to practice teaching signs. As 4 o'clock approached, Jonathan felt his nervousness return. It was almost time for his special message. He excused himself briefly to visit the bathroom, where he practiced his signs one last time in the mirror. His hands were shaking slightly, but he took deep breaths to steady himself. When he returned to the party, Mrs. Peterson gave him an encouraging nod. She gently tapped a spoon against a glass to get everyone's attention. The room gradually fell silent as Jonathan moved to the center. The triplets sat together on a small couch, watching their father with curious expressions. Emma whispered something to her sisters, her hands moving quickly. Jonathan took one final deep breath. This was the moment he had practiced for weeks, the culmination of his journey into his daughter's silent world. Even without Robert's guidance or Caitlin's support, he had to try. He raised his hands and began to sign. "Emma, Olivia, Sophie," he signed clearly, making eye contact with each daughter as he formed their name signs. "Today, you are 5 years old." His hands moved slowly but with purpose, forming each sign with deliberate care. "I was lost without your mother," he continued, his fingers shaping each word. "I was scared of failing you. I missed 4 years of your lives because I couldn't hear you with my heart." The room remained completely silent as all eyes followed Jonathan's signing. Even those who didn't understand sign language could feel the emotion behind his movements. "Today, I promise to always listen with my eyes and speak with my hands," Jonathan signed, his movements becoming more fluid as he relaxed into the message. "I love you." As he formed the final sign, pulling his arms across his chest in the universal sign for love, Jonathan felt tears sliding down his face. For a moment, nothing happened. The girls stared at him, their expressions unreadable. Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest as he waited for their reaction. Then, in a moment he would remember for the rest of his life, all 3 girls simultaneously slid off the couch and ran to him. Emma reached him first, wrapping her small arms around his legs. Olivia and Sophie followed immediately, and Jonathan knelt down to embrace all 3 of them at once. Even Sophie, who rarely initiated physical contact, held tightly to her father's neck. Through his tears, Jonathan could see there wasn't a dry eye in the room. From the doorway, a figure watched this scene unfold, then quietly slipped away without approaching. It was Alexander Hayes, who had arrived uninvited with a business proposition in hand. His expression was thoughtful as he left the mansion without a word. As Jonathan held his daughters close, his phone lit up in his pocket with a new message from Caitlin. "Robert's awake and stable. I'm coming home tomorrow." The morning after the birthday celebration, Jonathan woke to a strange sound, giggling outside his bedroom door. He checked his phone, 6:30 in the morning. Typically, the girls never approached his room, staying in their own wing of the mansion until Caitlin brought them downstairs for breakfast. Jonathan opened his door to find all three of his daughters sitting in the hallway in their pajamas. "Good morning," he signed, surprised. "Happy day after birthday," Emma signed enthusiastically. Olivia held up a drawing she had made of their family, with Jonathan now standing beside the three girls, not separate as in her previous pictures. "Breakfast?" Sophie signed simply, pointing downstairs. It was the first time all three girls had sought him out voluntarily. Jonathan felt a surge of emotion as he nodded. "Yes, breakfast," he signed back. "What would you like?" "Pancakes," Emma signed decisively. "Better ones," Olivia added with a mischievous smile, referring to yesterday's cooking disaster. In the kitchen, Jonathan let the girls help make pancake batter. Flour dusted their pajamas and the counter, but he didn't care about the mess. While cooking, Emma slowly taught Jonathan new signs for kitchen items. "This is spatula," she signed patiently, showing him the proper hand motion. Jonathan repeated the sign until Emma nodded in approval. "You're a good teacher," Jonathan signed. Emma beamed at the compliment. While they ate, Jonathan received a text message from Caitlin. "Leaving hospital now. Flight arrives at 11. Robert is doing much better. Caitlin comes home today," Jonathan signed to the girls, showing them the message. All three girls expressed excitement, but Jonathan noticed they didn't seem desperate for her return as they might have before. Something fundamental had shifted in their relationship with him. As Jonathan cleared the breakfast dishes, his phone rang. It was Diane from the office. "I'm sorry to bother you at home, sir," she said, "but Alexander Hayes has requested a private meeting with you tomorrow. He says it's not about the takeover." "What does he want?" Jonathan asked. "He wouldn't say." "Just that it's personal, not business." Jonathan thought back to the birthday party. Mrs. Peterson had mentioned seeing Alexander briefly, though Jonathan hadn't spotted him. "Set it up for tomorrow afternoon," Jonathan decided. "At the neutral location, not our offices." After hanging up, Jonathan found Sophie tugging at his sleeve, holding her favorite book. "Read now?" she signed. Before the birthday, Sophie would never have approached him directly with such a request. She would have waited for Caitlin to mediate. "Yes," Jonathan signed, sitting down on the living room couch. To his surprise, all three girls joined them for story time. Jonathan signed the familiar tale, now more confident with the signs he had practiced many times. When he didn't know a particular sign, Emma would teach him, showing remarkable patience. "Like this," she would sign, demonstrating the correct hand position. Olivia drew pictures to help when words failed them, while Sophie watched everything with her usual careful attention. When Jonathan's phone buzzed with a message from Patricia about company business, he glanced at it briefly, then put the phone away to finish the story. The girls noticed this choice, his focus on them rather than work, and exchanged pleased looks. At 11:30, Caitlin's taxi pulled into the driveway. Jonathan and the girls waited at the door to welcome her. When Caitlin stepped out, looking tired but relieved, she paused in surprise at the sight of all four Blackwells standing together. "Welcome home," Jonathan signed and spoke simultaneously. Caitlin's eyes widened at his improved signing. The girls rushed to hug her, then immediately began signing rapidly, all trying to tell her about the birthday party at once. "Slow down," Caitlin laughed, looking between the excited girls and Jonathan. "I can't understand when you all sign at once." Inside, as Caitlin settled on the couch, Emma took the lead in explaining everything that had happened. "Daddy made a speech," Emma signed proudly. "With his hands. He said he loves us. He burned the pancakes," Olivia added with a giggle. "And read stories every night," Sophie contributed quietly. Caitlin looked at Jonathan with amazement. "You managed all that alone?" "We figured it out together," Jonathan replied, signing along with his words. The drawing pad helped when signing wasn't enough. They're approaching you directly, Caitlin observed. That's new, Jonathan nodded. Something changed after the birthday speech. They're giving me a chance now. Later, while the girls napped, Jonathan and Caitlin talked in his office. Robert is doing much better, Caitlin reported. The doctors expect a full recovery, though he'll need physical therapy. I'm glad to hear it, Jonathan said sincerely. You can take more time off if needed. Thank you, but he's in good hands now. Caitlin hesitated. Jonathan, what happened here while I was gone? The girls seem completely different with you. Jonathan thought for a moment. I think they finally believe I'm not going to disappear again, that I'm serious about learning their language. Your signing has improved remarkably, Caitlin noted. Necessity is a powerful motivator, Jonathan smiled. Emma has become my primary teacher. She's very direct about my mistakes. She gets that from her mother, Caitlin said softly. Jonathan's expression grew wistful. Rebecca would have learned sign language immediately. She wouldn't have wasted 4 years like I did. You can't change the past, Caitlin reminded him. But you're here now. The next afternoon, Jonathan met Alexander Hayes at a small cafe halfway between their respective company headquarters. Hayes was already seated when Jonathan arrived, looking less polished than usual. Instead of his typical power suit, he wore casual clothes and appeared to have had little sleep. Thank you for meeting me, Hayes said as Jonathan sat down. Your request surprised me, Jonathan admitted, especially after your press conference about acquiring my company. Hayes had the decency to look embarrassed. That's partly why I wanted to talk. I was at your house yesterday for your daughter's birthday. So Mrs. Peterson mentioned. May I ask why? I came with a business proposition, Hayes admitted. Another attempt to pressure you into selling. And yet you left without speaking to me. Hayes stared into his coffee cup. I saw your speech to your daughters. I don't understand sign language, but I didn't need to. It was obvious what was happening. Jonathan waited, sensing there was more. I have a teenage son, Hayes continued, pulling out his phone to show a photo of a boy around 15 years old. Tyler. He lives with his mother in California. I see him maybe twice a year. I didn't know you had a child, Jonathan said, surprised. Few people do. I've been so focused on beating you in business that I've missed most of his life. Hayes put his phone away. Watching you yesterday made me realize what I've been doing. And what's that? Sacrificing what matters for what doesn't. Hayes looked directly at Jonathan. I came to propose something different than a hostile takeover. A partnership. Jonathan raised his eyebrows. A partnership? Blackwell Vertex Assistive Technologies, Hayes suggested. Your new focus on technology for the deaf community is brilliant from both a business and humanitarian perspective. We have manufacturing capabilities that could help scale these products faster. Why the sudden change of heart? I'm flying to California next week to see Tyler, Hayes said. For the first time in years, I'm staying for more than a weekend. Watching you with your daughters made me realize I don't want to be a stranger to my son anymore. When Jonathan returned home, he found the girls in the learning room with Caitlin. Emma was teaching Sophie a new sign game, while Olivia drew at a small table. How was your meeting? Caitlin asked. Surprising, Jonathan replied. Hayes proposed a partnership instead of a takeover. That's unexpected. He was at the birthday party, Jonathan explained. He saw my speech to the girls. Before Jonathan could elaborate, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Peterson showed in Dr. Livingston, accompanied by 2 people Jonathan didn't recognize. Mr. Blackwell, Dr. Livingston greeted him. I hope we're not interrupting. These are administrators from the Hartford School for the Deaf. After seeing your daughters at the party yesterday, they wanted to meet with you directly. The administrators, a tall man named Mr. Thompson and a woman named Ms. Rivera, shook Jonathan's hand. Ms. Rivera signed as she spoke. We were very impressed by the environment you've created here, she said. and by your dedication to learning sign language. I'm still a beginner, Jonathan signed modestly. But you're committed, Mr. Thompson noted. Many parents never make that effort. The girls noticed the visitors and approached curiously. Emma immediately began signing with Ms. Rivera, who was clearly delighted by Emma's confidence. We'd like to discuss a flexible attendance program for the girls, Ms. Rivera explained. They could attend our school part-time while continuing their home education. As Jonathan watched his daughters interact comfortably with these new adults who spoke their language, he realized another major decision point had arrived. The educational path he chose would shape their future development. Across the room, he noticed Caitlin watching the exchange with an uncertain expression. Her temporary position had clearly evolved into something more permanent, and Jonathan wondered what she was thinking as these school officials discussed options that might change her role. The comfortable family unit they had built now stood at a crossroads. After the Hartford school administrators left, Jonathan found himself staring at the stack of brochures they had provided. Each glossy page showed smiling deaf children in classrooms, on playgrounds, and participating in various activities. The school looked wonderful, but Jonathan felt conflicted. "What are you thinking?" Caitlin asked, joining him at the kitchen table after putting the girls down for their afternoon rest. "I'm thinking everything is changing very quickly," Jonathan replied, signing along with his words, a habit he had developed in recent days. "1 week ago, I was barely communicating with my daughters. Now I'm considering school options and business partnerships." "Change can be good," Caitlin said carefully. "The girls seem ready for more social interaction with deaf peers." Jonathan nodded. "I noticed how excited Emma was to meet Miss Rivera. She rarely connects that quickly with adults." "Ms. Rivera is deaf herself," Caitlin explained. "Emma probably felt understood in a way that even I can't provide." Jonathan looked up from the brochures. "Are you okay? You seemed uncomfortable during their visit." Caitlin hesitated. "It's just, my role here has changed. I came as a nanny for children who couldn't communicate with their father. Now you're signing with them directly." "Are you worried about your position?" Jonathan asked. Before Caitlin could answer, they heard footsteps. Sophie appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. She had woken early from her rest time. "Hello, Sophie," Jonathan signed. Then, "Did you have a good nap?" Sophie shook her head and walked directly to Jonathan, climbing onto his lap, something she had never done before the birthday celebration. She pointed to the school brochures. "What's this?" She signed. "A school for deaf children," Jonathan explained carefully, using signs he knew Sophie would understand. "Would you like to visit?" Sophie studied the pictures thoughtfully before signing. "With you?" "Yes," Jonathan signed. "I will go with you." This simple exchange, impossible just weeks ago, demonstrated how much had changed. Sophie trusted him enough now to approach him directly and ask questions. When Emma and Olivia woke from their nap, Jonathan gathered all 3 girls to discuss the school idea. He spread the brochures on the floor where they could see the pictures. "This is Hartford School," he signed. "It's for deaf children like you. Teachers use sign language. You could go some days, stay home other days." Emma immediately had questions, her hands moving rapidly. "Will we be in the same class? Are there art rooms? Can we still have lessons with Caitlin?" Jonathan looked to Caitlin for help with the translation, then answered yes to all questions. "This would be in addition to your home learning, not instead of it." Olivia pointed to a picture of children painting and signed, "I want to go there." "We will visit first," Jonathan signed, "then decide together." The next morning, Jonathan had a video conference with Patricia from his home office. The girls occasionally peeked through the glass walls, waving when they caught his eye. "The partnership proposal from Hayes looks promising," Patricia reported. "Our legal team has reviewed the initial terms. His manufacturing capabilities would help us produce the assistive devices much faster." "What about the board?" Jonathan asked. "Richard won't be happy about working with our former competitor." "Actually, Richard was surprisingly supportive once he saw the financial projections," Patricia replied. He called it strategically sound, which from Richard is high praise. And our stock? Patricia smiled. Up 12% since the restructuring announcement. The market likes our new direction. After the call ended, Jonathan checked his calendar. The visit to the Hartford school was scheduled for tomorrow, followed by a meeting with Alexander Hayes to finalize partnership details. That evening, while helping Olivia with an art project, Jonathan noticed Caitlin sitting alone on the patio. He asked Mrs. Peterson to watch the girls for a few minutes and joined Caitlin outside. "Beautiful sunset," he commented, sitting in the chair beside her. "It is," Caitlin agreed, looking distracted. "Something on your mind?" Caitlin took a deep breath. "Ms. Rivera called me this afternoon. She offered me a position at the Hartford school. They need someone to help families with the transition, someone who understands both the deaf world and the hearing world." "That's a great opportunity," Jonathan said, though he felt a twist of concern. "Are you considering it?" "I don't know," Caitlin admitted. "I came here to be their nanny, but now I need to decide if I'm staying as part of this family or moving on to help other children." "You are part of this family," Jonathan said firmly. "The girls adore you." "But they need you more than they need me now," Caitlin said. "You're connecting with them directly. That's how it should be." "That doesn't mean you're replaceable," Jonathan argued. "Your expertise, your patience. We still need you, Caitlin." Caitlin smiled sadly. "I'll think about it. I promised Ms. Rivera an answer by next week." The next day, Jonathan drove the family to the Hartford School for the Deaf. The building was modern and welcoming, with colorful murals decorating the entrance. Miss Rivera greeted them at the door, signing enthusiastically to the girls. "Welcome to our school," she signed. "We're excited to show you around." The girls looked nervous but excited as they entered the building. Emma held Sophie's hand protectively, while Olivia stayed close to Caitlin. Throughout the tour, Jonathan watched his daughter's reactions carefully. Emma became animated when they visited a classroom where children her age were having a signing competition. Olivia was drawn to the art room with its large windows and colorful supplies. Sophie, surprisingly, showed interest in the small library filled with books designed for deaf children. The girls would attend 3 days a week, Ms. Rivera explained as they observed a class. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The other days they would continue their home education program. "And transportation?" Jonathan asked. "We provide a bus service, or you can drop them off yourself," Ms. Rivera replied. As they continued the tour, Jonathan noticed Caitlin speaking privately with several teachers. They seemed to know her by reputation, greeting her warmly and engaging in rapid sign conversation. It was clear she would be welcomed professionally at this school. After the tour, they gathered in Miss Rivera's office to discuss details. "We believe your daughters would thrive here," Ms. Rivera told Jonathan. "They're already quite advanced in their signing thanks to Ms. Johnson's excellent work, and we're impressed by your commitment to learning sign language yourself." "How would you handle their different personalities?" Jonathan asked. "They have very different needs." "We would place them in the same classroom initially," Ms. Rivera explained, "but provide individualized attention based on their interests. Emma seems drawn to language and leadership, Olivia to art, and Sophie to books and quiet learning." While the adults talked, the girls explored a small play area in the corner of the office. Jonathan noticed how they interacted confidently with the educational toys, occasionally signing to each other about their discoveries. On the drive home, Jonathan asked the girls, "What did you think of the school?" "I liked the big kids signing game," Emma signed enthusiastically. "I want to learn that." "The art room has better paints than home," Olivia contributed. Sophie simply signed, "Books with hands," referring to the sign language picture books she had discovered. "So, you want to go?" Jonathan confirmed. All 3 girls nodded, though Sophie added, "Not every day." 3 days only," Jonathan assured her. "Other days at home with me and Caitlin." That afternoon, Jonathan met Alexander Hayes at Blackwell Technologies to finalize their partnership agreement. The legal teams from both companies had worked out the details for Blackwell Vertex Assistive Technologies. My son was surprised when I told him I was partnering with you instead of trying to take over your company, Hayes admitted as they signed the documents. He said it was the first business decision of mine he actually liked. "How is it going with him?" Jonathan asked. "Better than I expected," Hayes replied. "He's coming to stay with me for a month this summer. I've already enrolled in a cooking class so I can make him something other than microwave dinners." After Hayes left, Patricia joined Jonathan in his office. "Congratulations," she said. "This partnership will accelerate our assistive technology division by at least 2 years. Thank you for managing everything so smoothly during my reduced hours," Jonathan said. "The board reports that our performance has actually improved under your leadership." "It's easier to lead when the vision is clear," Patricia replied. "And yours has never been clearer than it is now." When Jonathan returned home that evening, he found the girls excitedly showing Caitlin the artwork they had made about their school visit. Each drawing depicted something different. Emma had drawn herself playing with new friends, Olivia had created a detailed picture of the art room, and Sophie had drawn herself reading in the library. After the girls went to bed, Jonathan found Caitlin in the kitchen making tea. "I've been thinking about your job offer," he said, "and I have a counter-proposal." Caitlin looked up with surprise. "A counter-proposal?" "I'm establishing a foundation," Jonathan explained. "The Rebecca Blackwell Foundation, focused on deaf education and technology. I'd like you to run the children's education department." "A foundation?" Caitlin repeated, stunned. "I've set aside $50 million for initial funding," Jonathan continued. "We'll develop programs to make sign language education accessible nationwide. You would have a substantial salary and a team of specialists working under you." "You're serious," Caitlin realized. "Completely serious," Jonathan confirmed. "You could help far more children this way than at the school alone, and you'd still be part of our family." "I don't know what to say," Caitlin admitted. "Say you'll think about it," Jonathan suggested. "Take your time. This foundation will happen either way. It's something Rebecca would have wanted, but I'd like you to be part of it." As Jonathan headed upstairs, he paused at the girls' bedroom door. They were all sleeping peacefully, unaware of the major decisions being made that would shape their futures. In just a few months, their world had expanded dramatically. From an isolated existence in this mansion to a future filled with school friends, educational opportunities, and a father who could finally communicate with them. The comfortable family unit they had built wasn't at a crossroads after all, Jonathan realized. It was simply growing stronger, building bridges to the wider world while maintaining the connections they had formed at home. 6 months had passed since Jonathan proposed the foundation to Caitlin. The winter snow fell gently outside the windows of the Blackwell mansion as Jonathan stood before the newly installed sign at the entrance to the East Wing. The Rebecca Blackwell Foundation. "It's perfect," Caitlin said, standing beside him. She had accepted his offer to become the foundation's Director of Children's Education, turning down the position at Hartford School. "Rebecca would have loved this," Jonathan replied, his fingers tracing the raised letters of his late wife's name. The mansion's East Wing, once filled with unused guest rooms, had been transformed into the Foundation's headquarters. Classrooms, meeting spaces, and research areas now occupied what had been empty space. Jonathan and Caitlin walked through the main classroom, where parents and children sat together learning sign language. The walls were covered with colorful signs and visual aids. In the center of the room, a young teacher demonstrated basic greeting signs to the group. "We have 15 families enrolled already," Caitlin said proudly, "and 20 more on the waiting list for next month." In another room, Caitlin had set up a training center for educators. Through the glass door, Jonathan could see her team of specialists practicing teaching techniques. Caitlin had hired 10 experts, including 2 deaf teachers who had worked at the Hartford School. "Your team seems to be working well together," Jonathan observed. "They're amazing," Caitlin agreed. "Each brings something unique to our program." They continued their tour, stopping at the technology demonstration room. Inside, Robert Johnson, fully recovered from his accident, was showing a group of visitors the new assistive devices developed by the Blackwell Vertex partnership. This visual alert system can connect to any home technology, Robert explained, signing and speaking with the help of an interpreter. When someone rings your doorbell, calls your phone, or triggers your alarm, different colored lights will flash throughout your home. The partnership with Alexander Hayes had proven successful beyond expectations. Blackwell Vertex Assistive Technologies now produced devices that made life easier for deaf individuals across the country. What had started as a personal need for Jonathan's family had grown into something that helped thousands. Later that afternoon, Jonathan drove to the Hartford school to pick up his daughters. The triplets now attended school 3 days a week while continuing their home education program on the other days. As he waited in the pickup area, Jonathan watched through the window as Emma helped a new student find their classroom. Even at 5 years old, Emma had established herself as a natural leader among her peers. When the final bell rang, children poured into the hallway. Olivia emerged from the art room, carefully carrying a painting she had created. As Jonathan looked closer, he saw she had incorporated ASL handshapes into the design. The signs for family blended beautifully into the colorful background. "That's beautiful, Olivia," Jonathan signed when she approached. "It's for the foundation wall," Olivia signed back proudly. "Ms. Rivera says it shows two worlds together." Sophie was the last to join them, carrying a book she had borrowed from the library. The quietest triplet had developed a special bond with Jonathan over the past months. While Emma flourished at school and Olivia expressed herself through art, Sophie preferred one-on-one communication. "Good day?" Jonathan signed to Sophie as she took his hand. "Yes," she signed back. "I read 3 books today." On the drive home, the girls shared stories about their day at school. Jonathan understood almost everything they signed now, only occasionally asking them to repeat or explain a new sign. His daily practice had paid off, and while he would never be as fluid as Caitlin, he communicated comfortably with his daughters. Back at the mansion, Jonathan spent an hour working in his new office. The space featured glass walls that allowed him to see into the hallway where the girls occasionally passed by, waving when they spotted him. He had designed it this way intentionally, a visible reminder that he was accessible to his family even when working. Through the glass, Jonathan watched as the girls played in the learning space across the hall. Emma was teaching her sisters a new game she had learned at school, her hands moving confidently as she explained the rules. Patricia arrived for their weekly meeting, carrying files and her tablet. "The quarterly reports look excellent," she said, taking a seat opposite Jonathan's desk. "Blackwell Vertex Assistive Technologies has exceeded projections by 15%. "And the foundation?" Jonathan asked. "Operating within budget," Patricia confirmed. "The educational programs are receiving positive reviews, and the scholarship fund for deaf students has already awarded 12 grants." "That's wonderful news," Jonathan said. "There's more," Patricia added with a smile. "Blackwell Technologies' stock has reached an all-time high. The market clearly approves of our new direction and your new leadership style." After Patricia left, Jonathan joined his daughters for dinner. Mrs. Peterson had prepared their favorite meal to celebrate the end of the school term. "I have a surprise for you," Jonathan signed after they finished eating. "What surprise?" Emma asked eagerly. "You'll see tomorrow," Jonathan replied. "It's almost ready." The next day was December 24th, Christmas Eve. The mansion was decorated with lights and greenery, and a large tree stood in the living room surrounded by presents. But the biggest surprise remained hidden behind closed doors in another part of the house. That evening, the Blackwell family hosted a gathering for families with deaf children from across Massachusetts. 20 families filled the mansion's main floor, many of whom had children in the foundation's programs. Snow fell softly outside the big windows as the adults chatted and the children played. In the center of the living room, the triplets were teaching other children a signing game Caitlin had created. Emma demonstrated the movements, while Olivia and Sophie helped younger children follow along. Mrs. Peterson moved through the crowd with a tray of cookies. She paused near the fireplace to adjust a framed photograph of Rebecca that Jonathan had placed on the mantel. She would be so proud, Mrs. Peterson told Caitlin, who stood nearby watching the children. Of them, and of him. I think so too, Caitlin agreed. The front door opened, bringing a burst of cold air as Alexander Hayes arrived with his teenage son, Tyler. The boy looked uncomfortable until he spotted the other children playing the signing game. "Sorry we're late," Hayes said, shaking Jonathan's hand. "Tyler's flight from California was delayed. I'm glad you could make it," Jonathan replied. "The kids are learning a signing game if Tyler wants to join." "Go ahead," Hayes encouraged his son. "It might be fun to learn." Tyler approached the group hesitantly. Emma immediately noticed the newcomer and motioned him to join their circle. She slowly demonstrated the basic signs needed for the game, her patience evident as Tyler attempted to copy her movements. Hayes watched his son with wonder. "6 months ago, I barely knew that boy. Now he's spending the entire winter break with me." Patricia approached the two men, a tablet in her hand. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you'd want to see this. The stock closed at an all-time high today." Jonathan glanced at the numbers, then handed the tablet back to Patricia. "You know what's funny, Patricia?" He signed while speaking. "I spent years chasing billions, thinking that was success. But my greatest achievement was learning to sign 'I love you' to my daughters." As the evening continued, Jonathan gathered the girls near the tree. "It's time for your special gift," he signed. He led the triplets and the other guests to the east wing of the mansion. Outside a set of double doors, Jonathan paused. "Close your eyes," he signed to his daughters. When the doors opened, Jonathan guided the girls inside before telling them to look. Their eyes widened with delight at the sight of a fully equipped dance studio. The space featured mirrors, wooden floors, and special vibration technology installed beneath the surface that would allow them to feel music through the floor. "You can dance here whenever you want," Jonathan signed. "The floor will let you feel the music." Emma immediately ran to the center of the room, feeling the vibrations as music began to play. Olivia joined her, while Sophie examined the control panel that adjusted the vibration intensity. Above the mirrors, a wooden sign read, "Silent Rhythms." "What does that mean?" Emma asked, pointing to the sign. "It means some of the most important things in life don't need sound," Jonathan explained, his hands moving with confidence and emotion, like our love for each other. The girls threw their arms around their father as the other families watched with smiles. Later, as snow continued falling outside the mansion windows, Jonathan stood in the doorway of the studio, watching his daughters dance to music they could feel rather than hear. The other children had joined them, deaf and hearing children moving together on the vibrating floor. Patricia joined him in the doorway. "The new assistive devices are selling out faster than we can produce them," she reported. "Hayes thinks we should expand manufacturing capacity." Jonathan nodded, only half listening. His focus remained on his daughters, who moved with joy and confidence across the dance floor they could feel beneath their feet. "Schedule a meeting for next week," he told Patricia. "But nothing until after Christmas. These days belong to my family." As the evening came to a close and guests began to leave, Jonathan noticed Sophie sitting alone by the studio's control panel. He sat beside her and signed, "Happy?" Sophie nodded, then signed something Jonathan had been waiting years to see. "I love you, Daddy." As Jonathan pulled his youngest daughter into a hug, he knew that the journey to connect with his children had only just begun. But the foundation had been built, not just the one bearing Rebecca's name, but the foundation of trust, communication, and love that would support his family for years to come. The mansion that had once felt empty and silent now buzzed with life and purpose. The silence that had once separated them had become the very thing that brought them together, a special language of hands and hearts that spoke louder than words ever could. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen